Good evening, everyone. I'm Joe Newmeyer, film critic for New York 710 AM WOR Radio. Let's have another huge round of applause, please, for Avatar: The Way of Water. And now it is my honor and pleasure to welcome cast members Stephen Lang, Sigourney Weaver, Sam Worthington, and director, writer, producer, and editor James Cameron. Right there, yeah. Jim, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's our pleasure.
Thank you, welcome, and congratulations, all of you, on such a phenomenal and stunning film. Let's give it another round of applause, please, because it is just, it's worthy of so much of that. Jim, there are a few technical achievements that we'll talk about later on about this film, just a few. What I really want to talk to right away, though, is the story. When you sat down to pen this story, you had one script you threw away after a year, you kind of went back to it. Let's talk about what you wanted to achieve in terms of the character arcs and the story and the heart, and what was foremost on your mind.
You know, anybody that's seen the first film knows it ends with Jake opening his eyes, which is obviously metaphorical and literal. He's transferred into, you know, a Na'vi body forever. So what happened the next morning at breakfast when he was sitting around with Neytiri? You know, so I started working forward and figured out what his reality was like over the next few years. And I just kept coming back to family, you know, having kids and what that does to you. You know, so you got this character that was so fearless that he jumps off his bird onto a great Leonopteryx, the legendary apex predator. You know, he's fearless, right? And he even says it to Awa. He says, "You know, I'll stand and fight." And what he's saying is, "I'll die for this." And Neytiri is just as brave as him. But what happens when you have kids? You know, can you afford to run around and be that kind of, you know, mythic hero then? When you got to, set an example. You don't want your sons to grow up to be warriors and get killed. Or maybe you do, but that's a decision, right? And do I continue to try to save my people or save my planet? Or do I save my family? And that's the crisis point that he comes to. So once I had my head around that, then I brought in the other screenwriters and we sat in a room for 6 months. And we broke the story across whiteboards that went around the room for Avatar 2, 3, 4, and 5. Yeah, it was a big project. So, you know, we've been gone from the marketplace for a long time, but it was setting up these other films. It turns out to be quite an epic saga as we follow this family and this guy that's after them, and their relationships change and morph, and all sorts of crazy stuff happens. And I'm really looking forward to that part of it.
Jim, the other thing about Jake's character and his growth is I feel like his finding the Metkayina and finding this other aspect of Pandora is in some ways symbolic of him finding another aspect of himself, right? As he's going through fatherhood, as he's going through another change in his life, this is another aspect of himself it kind of represented, right?
Right. Well, Sam is a father of 3 boys, and Zoe is a mother of 3 boys. And I've always said I really appreciate the depth of your commitment to acting. That you went and had a bunch of kids so that you could prep for the character. You know, that's dedication.
Imagine telling my wife that one.
I don't think she cared. She just wanted to have the kids. She didn't care what your reason was. Women have their own imperative, right? So no, but coming to it as parents, I think you and Zoe was significant. And Sig, you came to it, you know, as a parent, but a parent of a daughter. It seemed to align nicely with what you guys brought to it the second time around, which was very unique from your characters. Sigourney plays a completely different character. And even Stephen, you know, when I said, you know, we're doing this, he goes by slang, by the way. It's a thing. So Stephen is for panels like this. So, you know, when I talked to Slang, you know, that we were going again, he said, all right, I'm open-minded. You know, because he was dead as shit with 2 arrows in his chest at the end of the first movie. But bringing him back as this kind of imprinted clone of his first character, that created some serious problems for the character. So we were going for more depth, more complexity with him and with everybody. And Sig was just a launch of a whole new character who's also got a lot of complexity. And we just leaned into all that stuff. We just loved all that.
Yeah. Let's dive into that. Sam, and this amazing acting process of all of you is phenomenal. And Sam, you know, Jake again is our guide through Pandora. And as Jim was just saying, obviously the parenthood aspect is a big part of him. But what were some of the other keys to him as you envision the changes that were going on, and how did that kind of affect your performance in many ways?
It's about a man learning to listen to his kids, I think, and getting his true power from them. I think the scene where she says it's not a squad, I think that stops him to find another way. And I think we were talking about this today. In the first one, Grace is like a matriarch figure to Jake. And in this one, Jake is quite clearly the dad to Kiri. So there was an interesting dynamic that we experienced as actors. And it was almost like this reverse mirror image. And then with the other boys, it was a case of I could clearly see myself in Britain. I could clearly see myself in Natayam, different aspects. But there was something that Jim casts very close to the bone with those kids, which allows you then the freedom to kind of go into this depth of your own character and explore parts of yourself and parts of who Jake is, thanks to the truthfulness of the kids.
And this is obviously also a relationship movie because Neytiri and Jake are kind of going through a stage of their life. Let's kind of walk her with, and let's have a round of applause, please, for Zoe Saldana, who's phenomenal, of course, again, as Neytiri. And Sam, maybe the way the two of you and Zoe kind of worked on that because of the notion of the way Jake is seen by Neytiri is a little different in this film. He is recognizing something, a danger that's there that she maybe needs to come to a certain point. Let's kind of talk about how the two of you worked on that relationship in some ways.
A couple of things. The way Jim allows us to play, the way the performance capture stage allows you to play, informs the direction you take. And with Zoe, you bounce off her. So I really like exploring with Zoe. And I think what you then discover I've known her a long time. So without even us having to discuss character arcs and things like that, I think we discovered that she's definitely fire, he's definitely earth. We're surrounded by water. There was something very base and elemental for it that I really gave me a touchstone to come back to. She's a fierce actress because she's fearless, and the performance capture space allows you to be fearless. It allows you to kind of leave everything away and inhabit a warrior, a father, a 14-year-old. It allows you just to dive in and create, and that's how we kind of work on our relationship. We don't, she obviously would have conversations with Jim. I would have them too. I work a bit differently to Zoe. I discover as I go. And then when we come together, you just trust each other. I think
she does too. I think she discovers as she goes. I remember the one scene where you have to convince her to leave. Yeah. I just let you guys just fire off each other. And we didn't even get to the script until about the fourth or fifth take. It was just go. And it starts with, all right, two people in a long-term relationship, a marriage, kind of circling each other, and how you gonna bring up the subject, and then what are the trigger points, and then how does she react, and then how do you try to keep her calm? And it went nuts.
It's weird because you think with something so technical as this, and with say Jim's very, very detailed, but as a director, he's a great actor's director. He lets you explore. That's what he's after. This kind of whatever's going to come, this alchemy from the scene, from playing. And then in something like that, then later on, if I'm out of school, please tell me, if he discovered that, look, the scene works great between you and Zoe, but I want to see it from the point of view of the kids, because that's going to include them in this journey. Now, to me, that wasn't on the page. It was something that makes him a genius and makes me go, yeah, now I understand where we're heading.
But you wouldn't have acted that anyway, because you didn't know, Jake didn't know they were there. Yeah, but it hit me later. Actually, after we'd done the scene, I thought, what's the scariest thing when you're a kid is to hear your parents arguing about something really important that affects you, because you rely on them to always be guiding the ship, and for them to be arguing is really terrifying. Like if the family's going to make a move or whatever. So yeah.
And like so much that is important in this story, it is about seeing and about changing your perspective and being able to see another point of view. Sigourney, wow, Kiri is phenomenal, and 14, yes, and and I just want to hear what your response was when Jim contacted you about this, what your research process was, and how you kind of got into the whole mindset of being 14.
Well, I've known Jim a long time, and he knows me pretty well. So we had lunch in 2010, and we were actually trying to think of Jim had this idea of a a girl character who had some relationship to Grace. And just the idea of a girl who felt more comfortable in the forest with the animals and the plants than with people made a lot of sense to me. And especially at that age. And then, luckily I had time to kind of unearth my 14-year-old, and which was good and bad. And then I did have time also to go to LaGuardia uptown and just sit in on classes just to hear the pitch of the kids' voices and just to sort of watch their posture and how they moved through the environment, and hear their confidence and hear their shyness and hear all these different extremes that happen in that wonderful age. Kids feel things so strongly at that age, and I feel like Jim created a character in Kiri who has those very strong colors, and she can spot hypocrisy straight up, and she and so I got so much inspiration from the script. And then once we got to the volume, it's kind of a magical place, because once you step into that world, it's like an early theater rehearsal, and you're in your black leotard, whatever, and the other actors are so good. And I was terrified, but at the same time, I felt like, okay, this is the place. You just got to step out there and let her come out. And thankfully, she did. But every day I trusted it more, and I had wonderful parents like Sam who could actually look at me and believe that I was 14. So it was, we became a family playing a family, and there was a lot of trust, and there was, some big challenges. But Jim always gives you the time to explore and see exactly what it is, and he always says if there's anything you want to try, so that it feels really thorough, and you really feel like you've gone to the place that you needed to go.
And Sig was very generous with the other younger actors, because we had these teenagers down to, and our youngest being 7. But you always did it from Kiri. You never really broke Kiri. You never like, hey, come here, kid, let me tell you how this is done. It wasn't like that. But she spent so much time, and it was just building up those bonds of trust with the other young actors, to where they didn't think about you as the great Sigourney Weaver. They just thought about you as
that disappeared the first day.
that got quick.
But we took classes together in the sign language underwater, and the parkour, and the knife fighting, and the boot camp, etc. And I think we were working so hard, everyone just forgot about all these unimportant things, like how old I was.
Well, something that Jim
And what a megastar you are.
Well, something that Jim said makes me want to ask this, Sigourney, which is that obviously, like, sort of finding like how to bring out your inner 14-year-old in some ways was an acting challenge. Was there also a process, though, of kind of tucking away the adult, so that as you're going through that performance and you're preparing it, were there moments when you said, "Oh, wait, this is something, whether it's a gesture or an inflection or something that an adult would do. I need to kind of put that aside and find the 14-year-old, kind of make sure that that's not kind of a side by side with the 14-year-old." You know what I mean?
I think by the time I got to do it, I had kind of replaced. I had a way of preparing off stage where I sort of replaced myself with Kiri so completely that I think she would have been freaked out if she felt any kind of adult thing coming at her. And so I was able, and Sam has talked to this too, so is Slang, you're able to let it go. And although it's a very interesting question, I always felt like the situations, the rehearsal, whatever it was, I was just free to absolutely act in the moment. Off a lot of sensory things. There's so much going on. They're being uprooted. She's losing her best friend. There's so much going on. There was time for these broad strokes and primary colors, and then in other scenes we do much more detail. But it it was just like this free space where your imagination just took you into this story. A really cool experience for actors, and not a technological experience. A really freeing experience. I just want the actors to hear that, because it doesn't get in the way. It kind of gives you wings, because you don't have to do much. All you have to do is sort of have it here, and it kind of emanates out, and somehow it's built out from what we feel deep inside, and you don't have to make anything clear. It's just there, and this technology seems to catch it. And anyway, that's what it feels like.
Yeah, well, she is a fascinating and complex character, Carrie is. And Stephen, so is Colonel Miles Quaritch. He is also fascinating and complex, because this is a guy who hated the Na'vi and then finds himself one, and he still hates them. And he is just driven by fear and hate and war. Talk to us about the shades of his villainy that you wanted to bring out in this one, and what some of those conversations were like with Jim initially.
The shades of his villainy. I rarely think of it in terms of villainy. I think that, it probably is the case that we are all the heroes of our own narrative. Quaritch, very much so, I think. However, if he is called
Absolutely.
If he is called a villain, or in this case he's called a demon, I think that's water off a very, very tough duck's back. He doesn't give a shit what you think of him, it seems to me. It's a role I wear easily, which is a little scary, I suppose. But I enjoy tremendously advocating on his behalf. And the fact is, without that darkness, I don't think the other characters would be quite as shining and radiant as they are. So his function is in that. But the really interesting thing to me is how the radiance of this world, Pandora, begins to operate on him. This is what has he brought with him? What Quaritch has he brought with him? When he first arrived at Pandora years ago, already through the wars he had been in, he's cauterized away emotion. The wars that he fought on Earth were filthy wars, dirty wars, wars with children, I think. So any motivations that he had to join up, be all that you can be, that proved to be complete nonsense, in my opinion. He became what he became. He lost a lot of feeling, it seems to me. And so what happens and so he was in the right place up there. He made, what he tried to do is he was a square peg in a round hole. He kept trying to fit Pandora into his conception of reality. And within the gates of Hell's Gate, perhaps he was able to do that to a certain extent, but ultimately it caught up with him. He didn't ask to come back, and that's important. It wasn't he was just basking down in the infernal regions with Chesty Puller and Nathan Jessup when when all of a sudden he got jarred out of it, it seems to me. And
You never shared any of this with me. This is, I'm taking notes.
I'm just
over
making
this
it up
great
now.
stuff.
What can I tell you? Yes, in
Chesty
any
Puller
case,
got into this?
he didn't ask for this, but it came, and he accepts it, and he regards it as an opportunity. But the confusing thing is that now this way of water has entered into his DNA as well. And so this right-angle character, this straight-ahead thinker, is all of a sudden being beset by all these curvaceous kind of thoughts. And he's smart enough to know that he has to develop the agility to deal with this world, that he has to learn from his past mistakes. And he's good at it, but what he's not good at is dealing with confusion and uncertainty. It's not his thing at all. He's always been straight ahead. So this is the dynamic, I suppose, that we were playing around with, that Jim and I would discuss. And
How do you break down granite with water?
It's well put.
With water, right? I wanted to challenge him on the page. He's pretty much what he is in the first film, and we embraced that. There was no arc to Quaritch, but we embraced that going in. We didn't want an arc. We wanted him to be a constant. But in the second film, who knows where this guy could go? This is an existential crisis. Am I even that guy, that I was before? And do I have his responsibilities and his duties? Because Quaritch, I think you're right onto it. He's the hero of his own narrative, and his value system is about loyalty. It's about being exceptional, being good, and surrounding himself with good people. And when those people got killed by Jake Sully, well, that's a duty for him to perform. It's not an evil kind of vendetta-like thing. It's a duty. It's an honorable duty to balance the universe by getting this guy, bringing him in.
His values are strong, and so many of them are admirable. They have to do with honor and duty and loyalty, but they've been twisted by the system in many ways, I think, because what is honor and duty and loyalty when you're working for RDA? Really, what does that
Exactly.
what does that mean?
And we're going to challenge him a lot more in that same way. That kind of existential crisis continues. And, that to me, that's exciting. That's an exciting, dramatic challenge for both of us.
And just to finish it off real fast, to talk about the untalkable, which is to say villainy. The truth of the matter is we all know the movies here. We all have our favorite villains. And I guarantee you that the villains you see are exotic spices that you can't get quite enough of. You just love them. Jack Palance in Shane is probably the greatest villain. Why? Because of the economy with which he's used and the attractiveness of the character. It's always, they're more attractive than the leading men. I'm not saying I am. That's not what I'm saying.
Man.
I didn't mean that. I don't mean it that way.
It's on now.
That's why I don't want to talk about this shit, man.
Well, I just love that thought that of course, to the villain is the hero of his own. I mean, Richard III thinks he was doing great things for England. So it's like, if that isn't there, then the character is one-dimensional, which your character absolutely is not. Quaritch is absolutely up there with the most fascinating of characters.
Quaritch sees himself as going after Osama bin Laden. He's going after the chief terrorist on the planet. He's got a completely different moral framework than the way Jake sees it. Jake's plugged in to the world, to AWA, to everything. He knows what he's fighting for. So it's just two people in completely non-overlapping realities.
Except for the respect and the deep emotion that Quaritch has.
We
for
talked
Jake.
about something when we were on this tour. I said to him, Jake's going to have trouble killing you because it's the past. You can't kill your past. You just have to make peace with it almost. Yeah. And so it was, to me, that was kind of something that we were discussing. We can talk about for the sequels.
No, but we talked about the idea that there, but for certain circumstances that Quaritch never experienced, like meeting the Neytiri and all that, Jake could have wound up very much like Quaritch. He had the same, they're both obdurate, determined, willful guys on a mission. And they start out in the same place in the first movie, but then Jake has this whole epiphany. He sees the world very differently. Quaritch just sees that as a betrayal of his entire value system. I think it's important to understand both characters from where they're coming from, and that's a collision course. And I love that from a writing standpoint and from an acting standpoint.
Speaking of writing standpoint, Jim, I'm curious about as your process, as you're kind of going through, is there one side of your brain almost that's kind of working on the story, on the character arc, on the heart of it, and then the other side that's thinking about how will the technology complement this? How will this advance the technology? What's that like? Or does one propel the other? What's your process like?
I don't think one propels the other. I think what I like to do is working with the artists and the designers and the actors and everything, just challenge us to will this world and these people into existence by whatever means. And to me, that's a purely creative process. And I don't worry about the tech. I know the tech will get there. I know we got a lot of smart people working for us and working with us. In the case of Weta Effects down in New Zealand, they had about 1,500 people on this film. I knew we could solve it. I didn't know what the solutions were, and I don't need to know ahead of time, as long as we allocate the resources to get there. So it starts with a purely creative space. What's everything look like? It starts with the artists, right? And I don't mean the actors as artists. I mean the designers. Dylan Cole's team, Ben Proctor's team. What we did was we split the design. So Ben Proctor was a co-production designer with Dylan Cole. Ben did everything human. All the tech, all the hard surface models, all the ships, all the outfits, and all the weapons. And then Dylan did everything Pandora. The Na'vi, the design of the Na'vi characters, their costumes, their habitat, their kind of architecture, although I don't kind of like that term, how how they stretch these beautiful woven structures in between the tree roots and all that. So that was going on in parallel with the writing process. So we're just willing this dream into focus, right? I mean, everybody thinks. I mean, there's this kind of auteur theory that Hitchcock saw everything so crystal clear, but you don't. You have a general idea of what you're trying to do, and then the artists help you bring that into focus, and the actors bring it into focus. So it's because otherwise it would be the most boring thing in history to work on a movie for 4 or 5 years, and all you're doing is spending a lot of time getting it to what you already see in your head. It's like, I've seen this movie, but it's collaborative. So you make these great discoveries. We make discoveries every day. I make discoveries with the artists every day. That's what gets you out of bed in the morning.
By the way, you just mentioned people and the artists. I just also want to give a shout out to obviously some of the amazing cast as well, including Kate Winslet, Cliff Curtis, Jermaine Clement, Jamie. Let's have a round of applause, please. Jamie Flatters, Britton Dalton, Trinity Jolie Bliss, who play the kids, Jack Champion, who plays Spider, and you mentioned your production designers, Dylan Cole and Ben Proctor, and also Russell Carpenter, your DP who of course worked with you on Titanic as well. Let's just talk about, to wrap up, all of you, kind of talking about the process. I've seen you speak, Jim, about how that the performance capture has helped you focus on the actors in a new way, and that it has kind of eliminated all of the kind of the noise a little bit around it, so that you can really focus on their performance. I'd love to hear the amazing cast speak about this, and you kind of how that process has kind of come to a diamond's edge in some ways.
You
Sigourney, maybe we want to start with you. Ladies first.
Well, I think I sort of alluded to this before, which is that surprisingly, because I was myself trying to do very little. I was just trying to be in this space and live in this space and be Kiri. And what surprises me, and I could feel this happening, was that the technology is so sophisticated that I could just do that.
Yeah.
And so much would come across, which I didn't really realize until I saw the movie. I was like, oh, good, because I didn't want to, we all try to obviously avoid, showing, indicating all that stuff, but to trust that this girl would be there when we stepped out together was the biggest, scariest thing I've ever had to do, because I had to kind of put her inside of me and then let her go. And I'd never worked that way before, but I'm really, it was very exciting. And I really am grateful to the technology, because I couldn't be thinking about that too.
No, you couldn't, and we want it to be kind of invisible from your perspective, and to a large extent from
It's
what you were.
just you and the actors.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
just is like a theater rehearsal, and you're with the actors, and it's all like happening, really happening. And thank God the technology and Jim's work is picking up all these things. And then he can go back in and pick his favorite takes and do coverage from what's already recorded. So you're not in a situation where you're trying to duplicate what you did, 5 takes ago, or for the close-up or anything like that. That's all magically somehow already recorded in what he's already done.
We only need one good take. I mean, if you think about it, everybody thinks, oh, well, this sounds like a lot of artifice, and there's something pure about photographic cinema. But I would submit that photographic cinema has more artifice in some ways. Artifice in the acting process, because you do the master, and now you got to match that. Now you got to duplicate that performance again for the close-up and the over-the-shoulder and all that, and you wind up doing the same thing over and over, or trying to hit that pitch again, or maybe holding back. Experienced actors will hold back, and then they'll save it for the close-up, and that's why movies just got more and more and more and more close-ups. If you look at movies in the 40s, they only have 3 or 4 close-ups in the whole film. They saved it. And we tried to do that here as well. Not that much, but to stay in the world, stay out a little bit, not drive ourselves in to the bridge of the nose all the time. But actors holding back, doing their best work on the close-up, adds a layer of artifice to their process, and it drives the filmmaking style. So we're completely agnostic at the moment of creation on the set about what the shot will be. Because you can't act a shot. If you think about it, you're not acting a shot. You're acting a moment with other people, or with a situation, a jeopardy, whatever it is. You shouldn't act a shot. So we take that away. We should take it away completely. I'll come back later after they're all on other films, and I'll add all those. We call them cameras. So we're actually adding the cameras. It's a close-up, it's a dolly shot, steady cam shot, whatever it is. We uncouple those two processes, and I love it because as a writer, I just want to deal with character. All I care about, So I kind of divide the process into the front end, which was 18 months for us. Capturing 2 movies and the first act of movie 4. So movie 2, movie 3, and the first act of movie 4. And that was just a beautiful, year and a half of just pure creation. And then I have to serve out the rest of my prison sentence, which is doing all the, 3,000 VFX shots, but that's all right. You guys run along, have fun, be with your families.
Yeah.
It's all good. It's all good.
How often, though, have you said to yourself with chagrin, damn it, I did my best work off camera? You're standing there doing it for somebody else, and you did your best work there. Why? Because you're totally relaxed, or for whatever reason, Well, in this process, you're always off camera, and you're always on camera. It just is. And that's really very, very, I think Sig said it so well, it's a liberating experience for an actor.
Yeah, and it brings the heart of the story, the heart of the film, so much to the forefront, just as much as everything else. It wraps us around and it connects us. Thank you all so much for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, congratulations, all of you. Stephen Lang, Sigourney Weaver, Sam Worthington, and James Cameron. The film is Avatar: The Way of Water. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.